Greetings, everyone. Timothy Kamuzupiri from Agroecology and Gemfa. I would like to talk about sustainable agriculture, particularly agroecology. If you look at the world today, the number one challenge we have is climate change. And climate change is talked about on various platforms, it's talked about at various conferences. And at all these platforms, it's agreed that agriculture is one of the drivers of climate change. What's never mentioned is that agriculture is also one of the drivers for climate action. It's also one of the best solutions we have. So, what has to be made clear is that bad agricultural practices are a driver for climate change. But good agricultural practices are a driver for climate action. They can help us solve so many problems and restore most of our ecosystems. So, why isn't the emphasis on agriculture being used as a driver for climate action? Why is the emphasis so much on it being the evil that leads to climate change? If we're going to solve the challenge of climate change, then it is important that we look at the best solutions we have. And one of the best solutions we have is agriculture that is practiced sustainably. Sustainable agriculture. The term I prefer to use is agroecology. How exactly are we as a global family concerned about our future supposed to implement this sustainable agriculture? Well, the first thing we need to do is acknowledge the fact that the current conventional practices are not helping us. We need to embrace more sustainable practices. With third world countries such as Zambia, it's important for us to find ways and means of supporting our small scale farmers. When you look at our small scale farmers, they've got a huge challenge because they need to produce food for themselves and also produce extra crops for sale. But the means of production are very expensive for them because they rely so much on hybrid seeds and artificial fertilizers. And these are very expensive for them. Even in cases where government is supposed to supply them with a subsidy, you will notice that the supply is often not enough, or it's not in time or on time. So why don't we go back to the way we used to practice agriculture before? Why don't we tap into our indigenous knowledge systems so that we can rely on local seeds, heritage seeds? Why don't we help our small scale farmers make their own fertilizers, organic fertilizers? Isn't that the future for agriculture? Now, people will argue that conventional methods of farming and commercial farmers are responsible for most of the food we eat. That is not the case. In Zambia, 80% of the crops produced are actually produced by 70% of the farmers. And that 70% demographic represents small scale farmers. So even with the hardships that they are currently facing, they are still producing the majority of the food. Imagine what will happen if that productivity increases and the cost reduces. That's what's going to happen if we allow farmers to embrace local seeds. They don't have to buy them. They are freely available and they can freely be shared. That's what's going to happen if we allow our farmers to use organic fertilizers or organic manure. It will increase their productivity whilst reducing their costs. We need to find ways to support small scale farmers because the type of agriculture they are practicing and the type of agriculture they will be able to practice if they embrace sustainable agriculture is the type of agriculture we want for the future. It's the sustainable type of agriculture, not the type of agriculture that relies on machinery, that damages the environment, that ensures that before you start farming, every plant in sight is cleared. That is not the sustainable way to go. That is not the way for the future. So let's do everything we can to support our small-scale farmers. In the case of Zambia, my motherland, it implies we have to support farmers. We have to provide them with land. The majority of them do not farm on land that they own. They farm on traditional land. So they have no title deeds to that land. They can be moved any moment. And we've noticed they are moved so many times. You will have investors that come in that take thousands of hectares, and all these small-scale farmers will simply be shifted because the land they are on is not really owned by title. It's traditional land or customary land. So how do we find ways of empowering our small-scale farmers? The 20,000 hectares we wanted to offer Kenya, for example, and Kenya, of course, eventually refused that deal or has chosen to delay it because their own citizens are not for the idea of another country offering them land. Why are we not thinking on behalf of our own people first? Why not offer that 20,000 hectares to our own small-scale farmers? Why not empower your own first before you empower others? That's not to say bilateral ties and bilateral support is not important. It is. But you need to support your own local farmers, small-scale farmers. You need to empower them first before you empower farmers in a foreign land. It's simple logic. If you cannot empower your own people first, then one should question your generosity towards other nations. First, empower your people. Make sure they increase their productivity. Make sure they increase the quality of life that they live. Then support other nations and other countries. These are a few of the things I wanted to share with you, and I hope we continue to talk about them in future sharings. Thank you so much for listening.